Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Artist Dialogue. And today we're going to do something different and special. One of our viewers sent his CV to us and asked us to review it. And we thought, why not do it online for everyone to see and everyone to learn from as well, not just for fun. So we're going to jump right into it, Ash. Is that good?
So, sounds good, and importantly, it's going to be anonymous. So
We're going
brilliant.
to take
Let's
care of
start.
that as well. Okay, Ash, so can you see the screen, the CV?
I can indeed, yeah.
Okay, perfect. So, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about the person whose CV is before we get into it, just so everyone knows the context as well. So this person has 4 to 5 years of experience in supply chain in different roles, and he wants to move into a more data focused role. I'm going to start off by focusing a bit on the layout, formats, and design of the CV, and then Ash will take the reins talking about the content. So, looking at the CV, the first thing I note is looking this. This is where the name was that we've blacked out, the phone number and the email address. Pretty simple, pretty good. I think in today's day and age, there should be a link to a LinkedIn profile as well, and or a link to a person's website in which they have their portfolio and projects, and you can show a bit more of your personality, because I've seen a lot of that going on as well. Moving on, the thing that stands out to me is this person has 4 to 5 years of experience, and at that stage you shouldn't be having your education above your work experience. I think he should move his work experience up and his education towards the bottom. Ash, does that make sense? Is that right?
It does. No, I would agree, and I think if you think about it, the purpose of CV really is you're trying to tell a person who doesn't know who you are,
Hmm.
never met you. You're trying to engage their interest because you've applied for a job. So the
Yep.
CV is the first thing they're going to see about you that's going to get you to an interview, and that's the job of a CV, to get you an interview.
Yep.
So putting the information that's important up front is critical. Otherwise, if you're putting information that's kind of either erroneous or not necessary,
Hmm.
slightly not material at the outset, then you're going to distract people away from what you really want them to see.
Yeah. And I think it makes sense that with 5 years experience, the most important thing would be your recent work experience, I
Yeah.
guess. Right. Okay. Moving on from that, another thing I noticed was that um, these squares at the top, education, at work experience, awards, certification, skill set, and then the two columns at the bottom. I'm not sure whether this is ATS friendly or not, so you better run it through an ATS checker online and see whether the system picks up everything or not. The last thing regarding formatting or the layout is I don't see a hobbies or interest section in the CV. I think that's very important because um, not only does it show what you're interested in, it shows your personality. It brings color to your CV and profile. And more often than not, in my own interview at my current job, I ended up talking about I ended up talking about one of my hobbies, running, with the interviewer for about 5 6 minutes, and that creates some a good rapport and a good friendly environment. So making a interest and hobbies section is, I think, quite important for making your CV more personable. uh, I think those were my few points on the layout. Ash, what do you think? Do you have anything to say about the layout, formatting, or design?
Yeah, I think I'd agree. Personal statement. I mean, that's your kind of your 2 minute lift chat. That's the thing that makes you special. That's the thing that makes you stand out. Because what you'll probably find is, if say this individual's applying for a data job, the people who are recruiting are going to get lots of CVs of
Hmm.
people who are experienced in or have experience of data. So technical skills, you're probably going to be lots of people on an equal par on technical skills. You're probably going to have lots of people on a par with experience. The thing that differentiates you is the personal profile. And how do you make that not too vanilla, not boring, not too obvious, but something that kind of highlights you as an individual that's going to attract you to an organization? So one of the things I always kind of suggest is say, for example, to your point, you've either got hobbies that require some level of discipline, work, and effort. You might be doing martial arts, or you might be in a club, or you might be doing something else, which suggests that you're doing something that's on a regular basis. Voluntary work is a big yes, because it highlights that as an individual you care beyond your day job. You're willing to commit extra time to something you're passionate about. And it also shows kind of empathy, and it's the type of people you want in your organization. So the personal profile is really critical, and it needs to be kind of, no more than 5 or 6 lines. But that's the distinguishing factor when you've got 100 CVs on your desk and they all look exactly the same, apart from the one person who's climbed Mount Everest, or the one person who volunteers and a food shelter and does something different. Or like you said, there's a hobby there that the interviewer or the recruiter can kind of sympathize with or can relate to, and then goes, oh yeah, that's interesting. This guy's a cyclist, or she does this, etc. So no, I would agree. I think the personal profile is a big gap on this CV, because otherwise it's a list of stuff, and there's no distinguishing factor on this CV.
Yep, I pretty much agree with you. Just a short question. By personal profile, do you mean a summary section, or do you mean showing your personality through your CV, through different lines, or through a hobbies section?
I would do the personal profile. So your personal profile should, in 4 or 5 sentences, be effectively your elevator pitch. And it's the thing that distinguishes you from other people. So it could be a combination of things you're passionate about with, hobbies, etc., or it could be something that you think separates you from your peers. And so it's got to be impactful, it's got to be relevant, and it's got to be memorable. Kind of like an elevator pitch. Because if you make an elevator pitch very boring, then that person's going to forget you, because they're going to talk to 100 people in that networking event. Same with a CV. That person is going to receive many, many CVs. Yep. And if your personal profile isn't, impactful, memorable, then that CV is going to get put to the side and they'll pick another one up.
Makes sense. Okay. Yeah. So I think we're good with the layout and everything. Yeah. Ash, you want to dive into the content?
Yeah. Firstly, just a general point. So, you'd mentioned this person's looking for a data role.
Yep.
So the first thing is, so if you're applying for a role in data, then your CV has to be written with that in mind, i.e. the work you've done, you need to kind of pull out what you've done in the data space, what experiences you've got, what skills you've got, what's the scale, complexity of the work you've done, how have you consistently delivered that? So what are you showing in the CV to the recruiter that you're ready for a data role? Now, I don't know what senior level this person's applying for, but if you look at the most recent experience, which, it's hard to say because it doesn't necessarily say how long they've been in that role. I'm assuming 2022 was the last one, so that's probably the other thing. General manager, business planning and analyst. It reads like a role profile rather than things you've done. And developing optimum business model by pivoting company strategy focused on sustainability and scalability. So the thing I find with a lot of CVs is there's lots of really interesting words there that really don't tell you anything. And if I was to read that CV, what does that actually mean? What skills has this individual applied to do that? What experience have they shown? So when it comes to data, developing optimum business model by pivoting the company strategy. I mean, that's something I know you're in this industry, but something a consultant would tell you, Sal. But it's what does it actually mean? So how have you done that specifically? And I always say, when you're doing each section, you should lead with your key achievement. What's the thing you're most proud of in that role should be your first couple of sentences. And the way I kind of always advise writing CVs is, general manager, business planning and analyst, a sentence or two of what the objective of that role is. So my role is to lead on da-da-da-da. That's my role. So you want to give people a sense of what was your actual responsibility, a couple of sentences. And then there should be your key achievement. my key achievement was, I created a data model that did X, Y, and Z. This allowed the company to, able to pivot its strategy, which led to the following positive outcomes. So it's really specific, it's tangible. I would even kind of scale it. So there's a lot of kind of subjective language in this CV. It says optimum, right? If I ask you to define optimum, Saud, you'll have a word definition for it. I'll have a different definition of it. There's no scale in that first section. So I have no idea how difficult this role was because I have no idea the scale of this individual's activity. And so you're relying on the CV reader to make too many guesses. And as soon as you make the CV reader make too many guesses, your CV goes to the bottom of the pile because they are now going, I've got a million CVs to go through. This CV tells me lots of words, but I can't tell what the relevance is. You look at this, the second one then, supply chain excellence manager, which again, because the dates have been put into years, it's difficult for me to understand how long they were in that role. And it then says things like lead master data management program for suppliers by classification, data wrangling, and governance. Again, words, but what does that actually mean? So what specifically have you done in that space? When you led, the master data management program, what were the outcomes you were trying to achieve? Why was this program complex? What made it complex? What was the scale of it? What were you actually trying to achieve? Back to that thing about what your key achievement was, what was the outcome that happened as a result of you doing something? And that's why it's really important, because as a CV reader, as I'm a recruiter, if I look at that and I look at your key achievement and I'm not impressed by your key achievement, I'm not going to look at the rest of your CV. But what I'm certainly not going to do is try to find stuff in your CV because you've buried it so deep, or you've relied on me to make a ton of assumptions. And so when you look at some of that, and then other little things are, just spell check CVs. It says the second bullet point, maintained audit readiness. That would be an easy spell check to say that's not how you spell readiness, through self-assessments and upgrading SOPs and risk management frameworks, COSO. But again, what does that mean? Maintained, very subjective term. Doesn't say how long you did it for, what was the scale of it, what was the importance. And it's kind of, some of the previous discussions we had, Sal, when we talk about, interview and the star format. Your CV should be kind of a mini star format. What was the situation? What was the task? What was the action? What was the result? And your situation should have scale, complexity, and importance. And the bit, unfortunately, that's missing from this CV is scale, complexity, importance. All of that is missing. So as a result, it's a list of things. And I would not get that this person's ready for a data role, because I cannot see anything in here which suggests they've got tons of experience in data. And therefore, if you're applying for a data role, I would suggest this CV would be rejected before it even gets to interview, because the experience doesn't come through. And if this individual's got experience, then it's about articulating it in that manner. Key achievement, what did you do? Make sure you got scale, make sure you got complexity, make sure you've got importance. And if you're applying for a data role, that CV should have data all over it. It should be going into detail about what data stuff did you do. And I always do that when I apply for a particular role, whether it's in a risk role or a tech role or whatever. I look at my roles that I've done in the past and I pull out what's relevant for that role, and I rewrite my whole CV looking at my last 2 or 3 roles, and I think what was relevant for that role and pull that out into the CV. Otherwise, you've just got a generic CV you're sending to lots of people, and it won't hit the mark. And then the last bit is probably just skill set. So I think my view always is listing a load of things doesn't say anything. So project management, there's no context there whatsoever. contract management, no context, everything, no context, no context. So data analytics, SQL and Excel, right? So I have no idea how proficient this individual is in SQL or Excel. Now, if that was relevant for the role, you're relying on me now guessing that. And I'm going to go, well, do you know what? It's not worth the effort. I've got 50 other CVs to look at. However, back to kind of writing the CV, if in your key achievements against your first role, you'd said, my key achievement was, using the following types of SQL analysis, I was able to develop a model which allowed all of the various senior management to understand the company's position in X, Y, and Z. We identified opportunities which led to a realigning of the strategy, which meant the company was sustainable and and growth was achieved, et cetera, et cetera. So you're really tangible talking about what you've done, and then you can build complexity into that. The SQL model required 50 million lines of data across multiple systems. Complexity, scales, back to that, the size of the organization, the size of the data set you had to manipulate, how many people were working on it, for how long, give a scale. Importance, it was a critical piece of work. If this wasn't delivered, there was a material impact on the organization's growth potential, right? Impact. Now, suddenly when I'm reading that CV, I'm going, right, okay, there's something here. This person's really done this. They've done it in an organization, proven it over a sustained period of time for something important. And then you start getting a CV that's interesting.
Makes sense. Quite a few good points. I think you covered a lot of the most important points. But if I may, I've got a few on content as well. Oh, Ash, I'm so scared to show you my own CV. Okay. But I'll get to it. Okay, so the first thing I noticed was you have your bachelor's degree here, you have your A-levels here. The MicroMasters is though down here. It should be up here as well for consistency. There may be small points, but something that caught my eye. MIT over here is in italic. NUST is not in italic. I think these, similar to the spelling thing Ash pointed out, formatting should be quite consistent, because in your CV they're not only checking what you did, you will most likely be writing in your job, and they want to see whether you can create professional reports and business documents on a consistent scale as well or not.
Yeah.
Moving down, I've noticed that you've put in your location in two places and not at your under your work experience or under the MicroMasters, even if it's remote or something. I think, again, consistency is important. Just as Ash mentioned, dates is important. We don't know whether this job, assistant manager demand planning, was for 1 month or 9-10 months. I think that's important as well. Another thing I noticed was, so I usually put some lines, some bullet points, some words in my CV bold, in which I want you to pay attention to, the CV viewer to pay attention to. Lean methodologies down here, or M&I budget. I don't know what M&I means, but maybe the interviewer does. Or team bold. These things, I don't think these are the right choices to bold. I think something like 182 million PKR, or something like, let's say, Kickstarter statistical forecasting, something which shows an impact which you really want to highlight as you did something above and beyond. I think making that bold would be better than just putting team bold or lean methodologies. Is that right, Ash?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that kind of goes back to that bit about your key achievement. The way you've got to kind of assume a CV is read is, as you said, people will read this top down. And so the first thing they should see is your personal profile, because that's the hook. And if they see something that's interesting there, then they'll continue, which is why, to your earlier point, education should be further down. The role you're doing currently is where most of the weighting sits on. because that's the job you're doing currently. Now, if that isn't impactful and your key achievement isn't impactful, and to your point, around if this is a data job, then the thing you want to highlight in there is I've done data and I've done it really well and I know all the bits to do it. Right? So that's what you'd highlight. You'd draw people's attention to that in some way, shape, or form. I'd say, you do key achievements, or you could make it bold or whatever, but that's the thing.
Yeah.
Now, when you read down and you look at that first role, you're not going to read beyond there, the CV probably, because you're going, right, you just don't have the experience. And if it's a junior entry level role in data, you might give the person a chance and you go, right, okay, it's an entry level, limited experience, fine. You've got some relevant kind of qualifications, possibly, but that's all if it's entry level. But if you're looking for someone who's going to come in and do a data analyst type role, data scientist type role, then there's nothing in the CV that suggests that's there. So I would only, you're quite right. I would only highlight things that are relevant to what you want the person to see, But right now, it's random stuff like M&I budget, lean methodologies, the word team. It's kind of a bit random. And your earlier point about acronyms, there's tons of acronyms in here. Now, you're assuming the person knows what they are, so you've got COSO, which is, to do with SOX and risk management, but you're applying for a data job. So they wouldn't necessarily know what the COSO framework is, and then you're talking about other things like SaaS, sales as a service. Again, you're assuming you're applying for a role in an organization that's going to know what that is. So there's tons of kind of acronyms, tons of subjective language, tons of things in here which you're assuming. And the number one thing for your CV is, back to, people often forget this, the job of your CV is to get you an interview. The job of your CV is not to get you a job, right? That's what your interview does. Now, so therefore, if the job of your CV is to get an interview, then are you telling the person enough about the relevant things for the job to get you an interview? Or are you telling them unnecessary things, complicated things that are going to just confuse things? Are you even telling them about the necessary skills you've got for that job? And if the answer is you look at your CV and you go, yeah, I don't need to tell them this, this, and this, but what I really do need to tell them is A, B, and C, then that's how your CV should be built. It should be very targeted, very specific. Because it's very easy to spot a CV that's a CV that's generic, where someone's just sent it all, out to 30 organizations and hope for the best. Because it becomes a bit vanilla and a bit bland because it's trying to tick too many boxes. And that's kind of what this CV feels like.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. And I do agree with what you're saying, especially in terms of that last point, especially that, because I understand working on my own CV, sometimes you just don't want to take out certain things that you're proud of or you thought I worked very hard on, but you have to focus on the objective and you have to make the hard cuts and just take out those bullet points.
Yeah. And you've always got to kind of look at it, which is, what do I want the reader to take away from this? Why am I writing this? So, back to supply chain excellence manager, the first bullet point, led master data management program for supplies by classification, data wrangling, and governance, right? Okay, that's the stuff, some stuff you did. But what did you want the reader to take away from that? What did you want them to get when they read that? And have you articulated that enough? And the answer here is no. But that's the way you should be writing your CV, to go, right, if I gave this to someone, what do I want them to take away? And if I want them to take away that I'm ready for a data job, then I need to be saying that in lots of places explicitly and evidencing that in my CV. And if I've not said that explicitly and I've not evidenced that explicitly, then it's not going to work. And this is where the personal profile is really important, because you might find you love data, and you might find that my hobby is I do statistics for my local football team, or I do statistics for my local cricket team because I love data. I volunteer with a charity and help them develop some data models. So it's all of this sort of stuff becomes right. And it's kind of like the previous episode we did, which is, you're at uni and you're going to go and apply for a job. What's the thing you could do proactively to prepare yourself for a job? Right, I want a data job. So what could you do? And you might not get the opportunity in your day job, but what could you do outside of that to suggest that you, one, have a good grasp and understanding of data, two, you're passionate about it, three, you're proactive and willing to learn and can evidence that? Then that's what your CV should be telling.
If you like this video, please like, subscribe and share with your friends. And if you want similar content, check out our other videos.